correct system, right? That we stay in a correct system that allows for us to, to be properly in place. And a lot of us are having issues with that. A lot of us are having issues with the things that are going on. We're trying to blame whatever church or different things like that. But the reality is this: the system you're in, the system is going to govern, right? The culture is going to govern the contextual, the context, or the facts. And a lot of us are without contextual facts, and so the things that we're dealing in, they're coming specific, right? Specific from where we are. Um, we're really having issues with a system that has us fighting against each other as far as brothers and sisters, a system that's put in place from the times of Willie Lynch, right? We're dealing with the systemic issue. That's what we're dealing with, the systemic issues. And unless we're willing to fight those systemic issues and admit that there's a system in place that already has us against the wall, that's been designed to keep you against the wall, right? Matter of fact, if you were to look at the system, there's actually a scripture when it comes to men, right? Because if we're going to talk about misandry, if we're going to talk about misogyny, we're going to talk about all these different things. First things first, we have to recognize that when it comes to it, the Bible even talks about that the enemy is going to try and kill anything that pisseth against the wall. Can we start there? Right. And before I get too deep into it, I'm sorry I didn't say hello to everybody. Shalom to Sister Beverly. Saying thank you, Sister Beverly. This is part of what Sister Beverly gives out, not only shea butter, things of that nature, but she also blesses people with bracelets and different things that come from her stuff comes from Yastel, or the ground that is Israel, so to speak. It comes from the actual from West Africa, has great products, Bev's Body Butter, and many of you already support her. So this is one of the ones. I wanted to actually wear another one, but I got it in the car. I couldn't get it before the live, but thank you so much. She blessed us yesterday when we had the chance to finally meet in person, and prayerfully the first time of quite a few meetings. Amen. And my wife and my family were very blessed to be able to meet as well. How you doing, Minister Tamara? Who hopefully we'll be seeing today. Amen. And by the way, once again, we're in Chicago for the next couple of days. We're in Detroit. So we'll be in Chicago today and tomorrow. We'll be in Detroit on Sunday and Monday. Sunday, not so much, but Monday, as much as we can, pretty much as all day if we need to. So, so please let us know. We're gonna try and contact everybody to see where everybody's at, and and make sure that everybody's on the same page. But we do have information. If you want to meet us, you got to contact us. If you're on the different platforms, right? Just make sure that you reach out to us and let us know that you want to come out and say hello, and we'll come by and we'll make sure that we spend some time with you and get you the information so you can spend some time with us. Amen. Alrighty. So, but yeah, so hello to everybody. Sunshine, I believe, Alan, Empress, or Cynthia, Tree by Living Water, Big Brother Thomas, got to call you. Bounty, thanks for being on again. Is it Kwame? I don't know if it's Kwamis or Kwame or Kwame. How you doing? How you doing, Minister Nice? Butterfly Effect. Butterfly Effect. I've been messing up. I got to get a couple of these names back in my memory, or in my recall Rolodex. How you doing, Sister Deja? Hello, Sister Tracy. Shalom to everybody. Minister Select Joseph. How you doing, Brother Henry? I guess the name is Slick Nick or Sleek Nick or something like that. How you doing? Once again to the Queen, the Honorable Mind. Thanks for being on. House of Diane Designs. Excellent. Thanks for being on. Sister Deja, probably not too late. I have to try and get in touch with you. Maybe you can send me a text to remind me so I can make sure that it's in my memory today when I'm taking a little bit of a break and I do a little woosah after all that traveling. I can be able to look down and catch up, and I'll be able to see it in the text. How you doing, Sister Shantae? Shalom. Sister Barbara, shalom again. Sister Beverly, shalom again. I was saying earlier, I don't know if you both caught it. I was saying I'm wearing this. I actually was going to wear the other one today, but I got it in the vehicle. So the way they got the situation structured here, I couldn't really get to it fast enough. But thankful and grateful to have you guys with us. I'll probably wear it tonight. But how you guys doing? Schultz, everybody. So everybody who's on, Lottie and everybody, thanks for being on with us today. Um, so once again, we're in part 15 of our frequently asked questions series. And uh-oh. And of course, the one thing that we need to work for the podcast is not working, but that's all gravy. We're gonna do what we need to do. But we're talking about misogyny and misandry today. And we're speaking on what is, these frequently asked questions, because we ask the questions. The reason why we got to bring it up from our perspective is we keep asking these questions and having this conversation based off of somebody else's culture and somebody else's standard, right? Somebody else is giving us this mindset, right? If somebody else wants to have conversation regarding this, somebody else is telling us we need to do what they want us to do. So that includes our conversation. So our conversations on misogyny usually comes from a conversation on feminism and romanticized views, right? Which means that the same people who want us to um, talk about misogyny are in fact the same people who enslaved you. So it's a very hard discussion to have with a lot of people, because how do you have a real conversation about misogyny when you're coming from a place to where it's usually a feminist ideal? And what is a feminist? A feminist is somebody who's dealing with a feminist is somebody who's going to be dealing with coming from a perspective that white women didn't get their cut, right? That's really what we're dealing with. We're not really dealing with um, everybody needs to be taken care of, right? And even when you hear a lot of feminist stuff, it's basically saying we want to be treated like white men, romanticize values to the point to where when you actually pay attention to the conversation, you will discover that conversation is actually one that goes like this: hey, we should be treated the same way that you should be treated. So we want to. So when somebody says that, we already have a problem, because we don't believe in equality. We believe that men should be men and women should be women, right? And that's something that's automatically going to be difficult for people to deal with when they're talking to us, because they think that they're coming from a perspective that's similar in value to ours, or is the same value as ours. And the reality is that we're already having miscommunication from the jump, because a lot of people, what they're doing is they're saying you you know you should want women to be treated like men. We have a belief system that says it is impossible for women to be treated like men. And that's part of the, like, can we just start there? I think that we got a little rhythm now that we got all the platforms on. I think that that really kind of is a great starting point. Thank you, Holy Spirit, for that. Because how do we have a conversation about men and women being treated equal, and we don't acknowledge the fact that men and women can't be treated equal? Matter of fact, the most staunch supporter of feminism believes that men and women can't be treated equal. And I'm going by very basics, right? And some of you've heard some of this stuff before, so forgive me if you're getting the same thing over and over again, right? But we have to deal with it. That there's no such thing as equality, because there's no two people that have ever been equal. There are no two people who've ever had the same exact value. There's no such thing. Somebody says, "Well, I love you just like I love you." You can't. I don't. Right? One of the reasons why a lot of people have issues in their marriage, for example, um, you can't love your spouse the way you love your children. If you treat your husband like a child, you don't have problems with your husband. If you treat your wife like she's a child, you can have a problem with your wife, right? And thank you for the likes, the shares, any gifts, anything that you're blessing us with, we appreciate it. Thank you so much. Um, right, but a lot of people don't think about that. If you treat hear what I'm saying? If I were to treat my wife like she's a little child, we would not be together. And if you treat your husband like he's a little child, you're not going to be together that long. Or since this happens quite a bit, and he'll be there, but guess what? He's not really going to react well. We have a problem because we're trying to deal with equality first, which is a myth. It is a romanticized. It's not even matter of fact. It's not even a romanticized view. It's a new thing that's trying to battle this romanticized view. Right? It's new, and I get it, and I'm thankful and grateful that people would try to say, hey, we know we need to battle against these Roman antics, this romanticized viewpoint of relationships. The reality, however, though, my brother, my sister, is that you will never be equal to any other person, let alone be equal. A man be equal to a woman, and a woman be equal to a man. And when you realize that your marriages will begin to grow, when you realize that your families will begin to be well nourished, because you will begin to feed the wife what she needs, and you will begin to feed the husband what he needs, and you will begin to feed your children what they need, and the children will sow into their parents what they need. And now society has this great foundation called family that now goes into other places and allows us to be able to grow. But the reality is that a lot of people are not into that. And so we have this issue, we have this stuff that's going on, we have this whole mindset, we have this whole belief system that's been set up where people are trying to talk about this, but there's really no such thing as equality. Husbands must be treated as husbands, wives must be treated as wives. Then you can start talking about misogyny and misandry. Because if there's no, like, watch this, here's the thing. If there's no role, right, if there's no role, if there's no value system, if there's no role in this is one of the major issues that we have. We talked about this with the shooter, right? When you look at the shooter that had the manifesto in Buffalo, the 16-year-old boy. Thank you, Ben. And thank you, Butterfly Effect. Look at his manifesto. His manifesto says that I got a problem. My problem, first of all, is not just that I hate black people, but he also says that there's no roles. And if you look at his life, if you look at what he was doing, if you look at the training he's doing, obviously, like, he didn't even have roles in his own house to make sure that he was taught what's correct from what is incorrect, right? We have a problem with that right off the top, but we don't have defined roles. So we're having these arguments in society, but how do you get past these arguments if you don't even have defined roles? And if people are busy trying to tell each other, that they're supposed to be equal, there's no two people who have ever been equal on this planet. Sorry, TikTokers, give me 1 second. Right. But we have to, we have to be honest about that. We got to be real about that. We have to have honest conversation and honest dialogue. Like, we have this thing that says that there has to be equality, but equality is a myth. You know why? Because if you look at twins, triplets, all the way up to what there's somebody famously recently who had octuplets and all this stuff. Um, they all are different people. They all have different fingerprints, right? It doesn't mean that they can't have similarities, but we have to act. But in order to do this, so if you're going to talk about and we're talking about from our cultural perspective, right? This is cultural perspective. This is cultural, this context, contextual facts. We believe that culture leads to beliefs, and beliefs lead to emotions. Emotions lead to feelings. Feelings lead to your mood. Mood leads to your effort or energy, and the effort or energy ultimately forms your habits. Your habits are basically what we'll call culture again. And so we're going to have a culture that comes down and reigns supreme and allows people to be able to be in the right place. That's a great point. Thanks, babe. Even um, clones don't have the same fingerprint, right? There's no such thing as two things that have the same fingerprint, that have the same DNA. No two animals have the same stuff that you'll see on their hooves. That's actually something interesting. I don't know how I went down this rabbit hole, but recently in my studies, I've been even looking at how they take care of animals' hooves, like specifically horses and cows, and how they actually, now it's irritating. It keeps popping up on my stuff, so I have to keep telling them I'm not interested. But there was probably about 3 or 4 days where I was really into that and was looking, because they have different patterns and you have to shave them down different. And so each thing that's been, whether you believe in creation, whether you believe in evolution, whatever you believe in, whatever version of the 6 versions of evolution you believe in, whatever version of Christianity you believe in, and all these different things, you have to admit first and foremost that there is no such thing. And if we're going to talk about our culture specifically, then you got to get to a place where you say, all right, well, what is the mandate? What is the standard? And the standard is that first and foremost, men and women are not equal, not because they shouldn't be treated with respect or they shouldn't be feel secure. No, men and women are not equal because no two people are equal. And that's part of the problem. We've been fed societally, right? We've been fed something and we've made norms of things that were never normal. We've been told that people should be rated and ranked, right? People go on dating websites, and what do you do on the dating website? You keep swiping until you find somebody, that you feel is a 7 or 8 or a 9 or a 10, and you keep putting numbers down there or whatever. What makes somebody a 10? Well, they look great. I'm looking for tall, dark, and handsome. I'm looking for somebody who's got this credit score. I'm looking for this. But there's a lot of people with bad credit scores that own a bunch of land. Well, he's got to have this much business and this and that or whatever. Well, there's a bunch of people who own your businesses and never finish college. Yeah, my wife says ranking is demeaning and dehumanizing and disrespectful. It is. But a lot of people don't recognize that. They don't realize that. They don't think about those things. We just go by what somebody says. We go by what we call societal norms. But because something is normal in society, does that mean that it always was? First of all, right? We always got to go back to context, the culture, the origin. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities. That word principality, it literally means origin, right? So we wrestle not against flesh and blood, not against each other, but against origins. We don't know what things were originally, or we've lost the ability to go back to the origin of things. That's why even when we talk about the term universe so much, why do we do that? To get you to get of the origin. Why? Because what is a universe? A universe is a verse spoken sentence. So if you don't believe in the Most High, that's cool. But you have to start realizing that you're using words that actually go against your belief system, right? You're going against a lot of different things. Or if you're somebody who says that you don't believe in a soul, that's cool. Then you have to be careful about talking about psychology. Psychology, psyche in the Greek, is literally saying psyche, soul, right? So it's in logi or ology is, or like saying logia. Either way, you're talking about either the study of, or you're talking about the logic of. So you're talking about the logic of the soul, the study of the soul. So once again, it's all culture based. It comes back to a place like, what are you doing culturally? What are you willing to do culturally? What are you willing to discuss culturally? Who are you willing to discuss culturally? And we have to think about those things. So in our culture, that's a big thing, right? It's a big deal, right? How you doing, Brother Clem? It's a big deal to speak on things culturally, cultural context, right? Contextual facts, not just facts by itself, not just so not just facts without context, not just context without facts, but put the two together. So if we put the two together, once again, what is equality? What makes If 1 plus 1 equals 2, then what makes you think that you have the same value as someone else, right? So that in and of itself is a huge piece. You said you're not conforming to the system's normal. The world isn't your standard of culture. Amen. Right. And so we have to. I'm sorry. Ranking is usually. My wife said ranking is usually to determine the use of something for what you want to use it for. That's true as well, right? So even you have to think about that. So what's a 10? So a woman is a 10 to one person. Well, if he's just trying to see if he can get with somebody to have sex with somebody, that might be different than somebody who's a 10 and somebody's trying to be married. That's a great point in and of itself, right? That somebody who's looking for, so if you have somebody who's ranking somebody and they're saying 1 through 10, but they're looking for sex, versus somebody who's saying 1 through 10, but I'm looking for marriage, two different contexts. That's a great point, right? If you have somebody that's saying I'm looking for something as far as this is ranked as far as something that is eternal, versus somebody who says that they are not, who has a nihilistic viewpoint and says there is no morality, there is no this and that. Like, think about it. We have a lot of people who are trying to tell us about how to love one another, and they're coming from a very nihilistic point of view. If you're somebody that believes that all there is today, right? All there is today. You'll have people that say that, like they do that in a lot of these movies, romanticized things, Greco-Roman type values. You have these movies that come out and they'll be like, the gods hate us, right? They say that all the time, or the angels are jealous of us. That comes from the Greco-Roman thing, right? But the gods hate us because the gods live forever. But every breath that we take, it's so passionate. Everything is just fleeting. We can just die tomorrow and everything can be gone. But the gods, they don't have that, and so they hate our ability to do that, right? because in their culture, you're supposed to bow down to the same God that you hate. Did y'all catch that? Right? In their culture, you're supposed to bow down to the same God that you hate. The same deity that you hate is the one you're forced to worship in their society, right? So it's already very misogynistic. How you doing, Cash? It's already very misogynistic. It's already very much so misandry, because even the women, the female gods, they have to bow down. You're dealing with a whole different type of thing. You're dealing with a manipulation of nature, right? I've got to bow down. I've got to bow down to a god. Oh, it's our pleasure. Thank you, Oil Golden. Thanks for being on again, right? It's our pleasure. And thanks again, once again, for the likes, for the shares, all those different things, those who are doing things behind the scenes, those who give any kind of gift, talent, effort, energy, even donations, resources. Some of you even give tithes, offering, etc. Like, thank you so much. We appreciate you for being on all the platforms. Thank you, everybody on TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, and the podcast. We appreciate you, right? But we have this weird thing. We don't think about the context. So we're having this conversation about misogyny and misandry, and we don't even recognize that in the culture you live in, every day you've got to bow down. Like, think about how devastating that is, to be in a system, to be in a society, to be in a culture where every day you have to bow down. Like, every single day you've got to bow down. But this is what this culture is based off of, right? This is what this culture is based off of, is forcing you to bow down, forcing you to be in a position to where you have to bow down, forcing you to be in a position where both men and women alike are tired. You hear what I'm saying? Men and women alike are tired, are frustrated with the system that oppresses. And right, even your gods tell you you have to bow down and be oppressed. Right? Minister Tamara was saying, look up the origins of the word patriotic. Let's do that, because I kind of know, but in all honesty, I don't really know the origin of it. I don't think I've ever really studied the definition of, or the origin of patriotic. Let's see. Let's look up what pops up real quick. I'm not gonna go into extreme depth one, but let's just see if we can look up a real basic etymology. And maybe you can put in there what you have as well, says Minister Tamara. As far as what you know about it, because I might not hit what you're having. So the basic definition they give, the first thing that pops up is having or expressing devotion. Okay, having or expressing devotion to and vigorous support for one's country. Right? But when you look at the origin of the word, it says you have to go back to the Greek. Right? And patriotic didn't become something apparently in English that didn't start popping up till like the mid 17th century. But it used to be patriotkos, or patriotkos probably, and relating to a fellow countryman. So how you relate. Okay, my wife, yeah, you found something similar. So fellow countryman or lineage member, right? So even when you talk about a patriot, right? How do you relate? And so we're having a problem, relating, and that's great. Thank you, ladies, for that. We're having a problem with seeing things as far as being relative, because we don't know the culture. See, the system that you relate to, once again, says everything bows down. So if you're in a system, for example, that's built off slavery, everything bows down. But we just think, and look, we should have this because it's our people, right? But we automatically go to a place where we just think of, oh, okay, so the chattel slaves, black folk had to bow down, or maybe we forget, Irish person that was treated real bad, but was still considered to be an indentured servant, got to bow down. Or we forget, what about the Indian people that had to come to the Caribbean? A lot of them do the same thing that we're trying to do, which is they're trying to figure out who came from where, because their lineage gets broken after a while. The people who were promised that they'd be able to have jobs, but they were actually forced into chattel slavery, but just put by another name, but literally had shotguns put on them the same way that people in Georgia just did, the Mexican people down there, and some black people as well. They're not mentioning, but in Mexican, black people, we the same, but nevertheless. right? And all this stuff. And a lot of people don't realize that. My wife says patriotism equals patriarchy. Can't have one without the other. Very well. There you go. I didn't even think about that part of it. I didn't even think about that part of it. Patriarchos, right? Patriarchos, patriarchy, the same root word, right? So thank you. I mean, I don't know if that's what you were trying to get me to get to, but thank you, babe, for bringing that full circle for me. And thank you, Minister Tamara, for even initially bringing that up, right? Um, patriotism, patriarchy. You're dealing with a whole different culture. That in of itself, that's. I mean, we could just sit and relish that. We could sit in that all day, right? When you're dealing with, by the very word, patriarchy and patriotism, right? Patriots, patriarchos. You're dealing with the same system. This is what the system is. So why would you feel like? See, so we have to be honest, fellas. If our sisters are going through this system, right? If they're in a system, if our women are in a system that is legit, has the same root word for patriarchy and patriotism, and they have to go through this system every day, we have to comprehend off the jump that they're probably not going to feel great, right? They're probably not going to feel great about that. Just like the Greco-Roman woman, just like the Greek woman, just like the Roman woman, she wasn't going to feel great about that either, right? They weren't going to feel great about it either. Say what you will, but they weren't going to feel great about that. Amen. Yeah, you have to comprehend the system. You have to comprehend the game and your role. Yeah, or understand the system, stand under it to understand. Yeah, to understand the game and your role. Most depth, right? And so, like we're in this thing where we have. That's why we have to be in the system, not of it. Are you see? We have to be aware of the fact that people had to agree to this misandry, to this misogyny. We had to be aware of the fact that people had to agree to this misandry and this misogyny. It had to be agreed upon. It had to be something that everybody said, "Yeah, we'll do." It has to be something that people are willing to give into, right? Um, and we've been raised in a system to say that that's okay, right? But see, so you got to comprehend, like this is a system of oppression, patriotism, patriarchy. It's the same thing, right? If somebody says, "I'm a patriot," you're saying, "I'm a patriarchos." Do you know what that means? Patriarchos is saying the same thing as patriarchy or patriot, right? And we put an ISM on that. It's talking about a system. Now, here's the deal: the system that we're talking about, right? And then before anybody tries to say I'm not a patriotic enough, I'm somebody who served. This is coming from somebody who served, right? Somebody who went out there, put his life on the line, and all these people will talk to me about it who never put their life on the line, never went through weapons training, doesn't know what it's like to be called the N-word by somebody who you have to be willing to die for. This is why I comprehend submission and values and different things on a different level. Because in the military, we have a very clear chain of command, which means we have very clear cut roles. That's the reason why people in the military had a beef when they were trying to change the whole thing as far as can somebody who's homosexual or whatever come in. That it wasn't about that. It was about there's clear cut roles. Like it doesn't matter if you're a male or a female. If you're a 4-star, there's certain things I expect, period, right? But when you take away those clear cut roles, but even in that, there's patriotism, there's patriarchy, etc. you know you said patriotism implies a bloodline. Yep, so specific people, not everyone included, very much so, right? Just like once again, you're talking about gods who everybody had to fear and hate, and gods hated their people that they were over, and that was the relationship. So you're supposed to serve a god, a deist, a deity, a Norse, somebody in Norse theology, whomever, right? And then they mix it into Christianity, so you have the same values as far as even what people think is the Most High, and you think that the person that you hate and fear is the person who you're supposed to respect the most. That's why you respect the Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan, you're supposed to fear him the most. Therefore, you're supposed to respect him the most. And we do the same thing in society. Um, people don't. I know people want to believe this, but people don't follow Oprah because they actually think Oprah is this kind-hearted woman. And so maybe there's some of that, right? But you follow Oprah because she's a billionaire, and therefore she's feared If you're afraid of, if she's somebody who's made it, you can be afraid of her, then you should respect her. You don't know what you're going to do, what you're going to say. Well, the word fear and respect are technically the same thing, right? That's why I went away from fear and I started using the word afraid, right? Fear just really is meaning reverence or respect. So we should have fear. That's why the Bible will tell us that we should fear nobody except Elohim. In that context, is saying that Elohim gets a different type of respect, right? And we shouldn't give that respect to just anybody or anything, right? But we do things in fear. But that's why it even says like, respect or reverence your husband. It's saying the fear or respect of your husband is saying to respect him. Why? Because a man's number one need is respect. But it also turns around and says, husbands, what? Love your wives and be willing to die for her. Both are in a sense love, both in a sense respect. But it's using specific terms because because of this way that we've been created as mankind. Not just mankind, as human beings. There's a difference between mankind and human beings, right? But we have this weird reality where we cannot treat each other with respect because we don't agree on defined roles. You're not gonna be able to get past this fight. Yeah, you're not, as much as you might want to. I'm telling you, you are not going to be able to function correctly in this society today if you are not able to get to a position to where there's first defined roles. Misogyny misandry comes from somebody trying to give you someone else's defined roles. How you doing, Minister Select Morel? That's somebody else's genre or gender, right? Remember, gender is different than male or female. Gender is the style applied to a male or female. That's why you don't want to be that's why you don't want to have platonic relationships, because platonic relationships, Plato believed that the greatest relationship that you could have was between a male who's in his 40s and a male who's a preteen, and he believed that the worst relationship you could have is between a husband and wife. Therefore, if you have a platonic relationship, that's the culture that you're carrying, that's the gender, which is why you have a lot of people who are trying their best to say that, hey, um, we believe that we, just like you have a right to say that you like a male, female, or you're man or woman, and this and that, we have a right to say that we were born liking people that are younger than us. And all we have to do is find science now to be able to back that up. Well, you know that there's little boys out there that have slept with grown women, and they were attracted to the grown women when they slept with them. So, hey, now, we don't want to talk about the fact that when they get older, they say, "Oh, that was kind of messed up that somebody would have taken my virginity and done this to me and did these sexual things to me and messed me up to where I would open up to this stuff." But we're going to just skip over that because somebody's going to use it to their benefit, right? We have a lot of that going on, and people are trying to do the same thing with our canon, with our belief system, with our culture, with our Tanakh, with our Torah, with our God, with our principles. People are trying to do the same thing. People are trying to get you and I to believe that you know um, we are wrong for the defined roles that we've had, and that what we believe in is wrong, right? That Balaam doctrine that we're warned against, that's supposed to destroy Yastel. The very things that we've lived by are now the very things that are attacked. Anything that says that this is what solidifies us as a people and as a culture are the very things that are attacked now. And so that's why we have to grab a hold again. We got to come back to where we were, right? Come back to what what was Paul talked about to be careful about, right? In Romans chapter 10, verses 1-4, he tells us in Romans 10:1 that it's still his prayer that we would be saved. He even says in verse 2 that we have a zeal of Elohim. We are zealous for these things. We as a people, we really want these things to happen. We still, the way that everybody else sings, the way that everybody else dances, the way that everybody else is going to get on their knees, the way that everybody else is going to hoop, the way that everybody else is going to preach. When they say that's good preaching right there, this and that, he said that's coming from our zeal. Your zeal is still on point. But in verse 3, he said, but you've made up too many laws or taken in too many laws from other people, and you've got away from your law. Therefore, verse 4, now the law is of none effect because you're not doing what you're supposed to do, which means verse 9, how are you going to confess Yahshua Mashiach? How are you going to confess Yahshua and believe in your heart that Abba raised him from the dead and be saved? because in order to confess, the word confess is homologio, to have the same logic. So how are you going to have the same logic, right? How do you have the same logic as somebody if you don't even know the law of what? How do you have the same logic of Moses, but you don't know anything about Moses' culture, right? Like how would Moses have treated his wife? And his wife, by the way, is a Cushitic woman. So when Moses treated his wife a certain way, Moses learned from his mama, who he breastfed from. He learned from his mama that took him in. That's Kemet, and he learned from a father figure since he didn't really know his daddy, even though he had father figures too. But he learns not only from Kemetic father figures, but also learns from a Cushitic father figure who would have said, "This is how we honor and respect and love our wives and our women." Right? We don't know the culture of that though, because all we know is Greco-Roman mentality. Now, when you're talking about misogyny, sisters, are you talking about how Cush treats their women? Are you talking about how Kemet treats their women? Are you talking about how Israel treats their women? Are you talking about how Greco-Roman people treat their women? Are you talking about how Germanic people treat their women? Not even Germany, as far as it's, you got to comprehend when I'm using the term Germanic, the people of Germany are not even necessarily always considered to be the actual original Germanic people. The person who made that that link and said that no, that's exactly what it is Hitler, right? But I'm talking about how did Israel treat their wife? This is why we have a marriage class, right? How did Israel treat their wife? Have you ever studied that? Because people will say, "Oh, it's terrible. They had multiple wives, this and that, or whatever." Whenever they had multiple wives, it didn't turn out right because it wasn't how you were supposed to do that. Now that we get past that, though, look at how the wives were treated. Right? There are wives that it tells you that they were disrespected, and it shows you that. And so, if it tells you a wife was disrespected, it then shows you how she was disrespected. It's not saying that was okay. It's saying, yeah, don't do that. But there are also wives that were treated with extreme respect. Do you know? Do you know of them? Do you know how they were? Queen Esther treated with extreme respect, and that wasn't even an Israelite husband she had, right? But she was treated with extreme respect to where at her word, people were put at the sword because they messed with her family, they messed with her people. She held the king accountable. She was able to go into the king's court and hold the king accountable to his very word. Have you ever thought about that? Have you ever researched that? Have you ever thought about it from that context? That the king was not going to go outside of what his wife held him accountable to because of his love and respect and honor and cherishing her. But we'll get an argument about misandry. I'm sorry, misogyny, excuse me. But people are going to argue misogyny with you, not big, and they're going to say that your culture is misogynistic. But the more you study it, you realize and recognize very quickly our culture is dang sure not misogynistic. What about the term woman? Because you don't know the culture. Ashach, or even some people say ashach, right? That's a term of endearment. It's one of the highest terms you can give somebody. So for everybody that'll go, oh, I don't like how he did with the Samaritan woman, and you can't give it's not meat to give to feed the dogs or whatever, But then she says, that but even the dogs can eat the crumbs from the master's table. What's the next word out of Yahshua's mouth? Once he tests her and she passes the test, what's his next word to make sure that she comprehends? See, this would have been shocking to them because they would have been cool with him treating her as bad because of a social construct or a race. But then when he says woman, wound man, woman, ashach, great is your faith. He would have been saying in front of everybody that I'm giving you one of the highest regards in human life because there's nothing like a woman. To us, there's nothing like a woman. And we don't want to be equal to her. We want her to be put on her pedestal. We want her to have her hair did. We want her to have her nails done. We want her to make sure that she feels a certain way. We want her to feel special. We want her to feel secure. We want her to feel like she's comfortable in her position. We want her to feel like if she wants to do something, she can, but if she doesn't, she can feel be secure. Like if she wants to have business, if she wants to have a job, go ahead and get it. But guess what? We want you to also feel like if you didn't have anything, or if you didn't want to do any of those things, and you just want to stay at home, you need to feel secure, right? Like it's one of the highest standards in life, in any society, in any culture that we have for our women. And yet people will try to tell you because they dislike women that we must dislike women. So now everything that they get through the prism, through the lens, has to be what they hate, how they treat you, right? You got to comprehend, ladies. You said you argued to your wife to buy more clothes. Yeah, and that's even an argument, even in that, ladies. And sometimes because you've been put in the system, sometimes you don't trust it. Can I say that's actually a great point, right? Amen, Sister Shante. Amen. We praise Yah, right? Anubis, peak game. There are so many of us that get frustrated because we want to get you more, or we want you to give more. And sometimes even y'all be like, and look, we get it. We're thankful that you would even honor what we're doing and respect it, to be like, yeah, but I want to get, we'd be like, go ahead, get your nails done. Go ahead, get your hair done. Go ahead, do this. Well, yeah, but we don't really have the money, blah, blah. And we'd be like, no, I don't care about that. Go get it. Yeah, but he's making a faith statement. And he's saying that my faith in making sure that my wife is taken care of is more important. Right now, if he's doing that to a place to where he's gonna make you go broke, that's different. But yeah, you can say technically you never have money to get your nails and hair did, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. Technically, I don't have money to you don't have money to go out to eat, but every once in a while you should go out to eat. But I don't have this and blah blah. No, like a husband wants that. A lot of times, like even if we don't know what to buy, we try to buy stuff. Even if you say that you don't like it or it's not your thing or blah blah, but we're doing that. We're trying to figure out something. Hey, let me give you something. And every time we try to give you something, and it's smacked away, it actually does something to us, right? But yeah, like sometimes, ladies, like you have to. But once again, we come from somebody else's culture. In somebody else's culture, right? As a wife, you only can do what you're allowed to do, right? You have to comprehend that. And it's a cultural perspective. Once again, we have people that talk about context without facts and facts without context. How do we have an apologetic conversation about anything that's correct? And we don't even understand the cultural benefit, the cultural mindset of it. How do you do that properly, right? Like everything we talk about, remember, and all these things, and everything in every greeting, you're dealing with a culture, right? Bonjour does not mean the same thing as hola. Hola does not mean the same thing as namaste. Namaste does not mean the same thing as habari. Habari does not mean the same thing as jambo. Jambo does not mean the same thing as shalom. Shalom, believe it or not, does not mean necessarily the same thing as salam. But we're having a cultural conversation to where we're like, oh well, you know what? We don't have. But that's taking us back to a slave mentality, a chattel slave mentality. We don't have it. We don't have it. We don't have it. Massa ain't say. Massa ain't say. According to Massa, I don't care about what the world says right now. I want you to go out and get your hair done. And thank you, Sister Deja, for the love. If I didn't say so already, right? Like I'm saying, I want you to go out and take care of you. you know, that's my culture. That's my culture, and this is why I dismiss the other people that try to tell me that my culture starts with 1491, even though they think it's 1492. But once again, they don't want to recognize, right? But there's a reason why they try to tell you your culture starts at 1492, because your way of how you treated your wife came before 1492, didn't it? See, 1492 is a big deal because it's not just in 1492 Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue. It's in 1492 your culture got taken from you, your language got taken from you. That was the beginning of it. Now, people were already doing this in a sense, right? Because we know that there were people here before Columbus. But what I'm saying is that everything that embodies who you are, the beginning of it being crumbled and and put in the trash can is gone. And so now the lens of misogyny and misandry is coming from a culture that says that it's okay to take yourself. This is a culture that says that you should consider yourself to be an American because you should be the same as by the social construct what a white person is. But the reality is that the original American is a copper colored person who is indigenous to America. See, even in that, we don't identify with our culture. So if I want real American values, I have to look at Native American values. Problem is though is that if I've killed off Native American values, then how do I discuss those? Right? How do I know what the value of karma or Shiva or whoever is if I don't comprehend the culture that goes along with it? How do you comprehend Shakyamuni Buddha? How do you talk about that and not comprehend that? How do you talk about the sutra and you don't know the culture that went with it? That's why interpretation, there's by definition, there's only one interpretation. There are many applications, but there's always only one interpretation. Right? That's why you have to comprehend interpretation. There's only one interpretation, many applications. So we're having issues with people trying to talk about interpretation, but legally, even legally speaking, right? There's only one interpretation. Legally speaking, there's how many? There's only one interpretation. So how did your people? And this is something when people try to check us on this, they think they're doing something. Our Afrocentric brothers and sisters, when they ask this question, what they usually mean by what I'm about to ask is they usually mean, oh, so before white people told you that. But it's a great question that they ask, though, overall, which is, hey, before you were slaves, who did you worship? Before you were slaves, this and that, etc. You said define interpretation. I'm not defining. I don't have a personal definition. This is coming from Black's Law Dictionary, and Black's Law Dictionary is dealing with ancient language, and it's dealing with what you even show up in the courtroom with. So if you're going to go in the courtroom and you're looking for interpretation, it has to be as follows. Right. Let me just go ahead and look up real quick. I don't have my Black's Law Dictionary with me in person, but you can always Google these things, right? So if I look up Black's Law Dictionary, right, and that's why we teach stuff like sovereignty, things of that nature, right? But if I look up Black's Law Dictionary, oh, I'm sorry, I just looked up Black's Law Dictionary. I should probably look up the word Black's Law Dictionary. Um, Black's Law Dictionary, and let's see, what were we talking about? Oh, you wanted me to talk about interpretation, right? Matter of fact, well, yeah, let's do it this way because it goes into other things that you got to know too. But anyways, Black's Law Dictionary of Interpretation. You said so it can't be defined. Fair. It can't be defined by what? By you. If you go into no, interpretation is interpretation. This is what interpretation is defined as. If you were going to a court of law, which basically law is there to protect rights. Law doesn't give rights, law protects rights. But this is our standard. At the end of the day, you don't have to be a part of it. But so interpretation is the art or process of discovering and expounding the intended signification of the language. So number one, it has to be intended. What did the person intend? There's an art or a process to be able to figure out what somebody intends. It's like you're trying to take words that I'm saying and trying to tell me what you want to hear with it. That's you arguing possible application, but that's not interpretation because it's not what I meant, right? So the art or process of discovering and expounding the intended signification of the language used in a statute. So what is a statute? Right? Think statue if you want, statuesque. Maybe you know what a statute is, but just for now, if you don't, think statuesque, something that shouldn't be moved, right? Something that should be standard, right? Um, will, so somebody leaves a will, or a contract, or any other written document, anything written down. We have to be able to see the intended signification of the language. So, in other words, even the language it was written in is important because how do you talk about interpretation? So there's some things that you cannot interpret. Even in your translating it, it still would not be able to give proper interpretation. Translation, interpretation, two different words. So even in you translating something, there are many things that you cannot translate. If I were to say ahabach, there's certain things ahabach, if that means love, but it has so many more different things to it if you know the actual Avda or Paleo Hebrew or ancient Hebrew. So if I were to try and tell you ahaba means this, that, or whatever, I'm still going to not be able to translate certain things to you. So you would say, well, love, action, blah, blah, but it means so much more than that. But I can't give you everything because the translation is not really going to give you the proper interpretation. So the language comes into play too of how something's written. Right, but it says, so once again, it's the art or process of discovering and expounding the intended signification of the language used in a statute, will, contract, or any other written document. That is, the meaning which the author designed to convey to others. So what did the meaning that the author designed, whoever wrote it out, and I would go past that, right? But once again, we'll stay with theirs. But I would honestly, personally tell you that you go past that because you even interpret what people say. So it's not even just what people wrote down on a piece of paper, but you interpret what people say, right? But it has to be the meaning which the author designed it to convey to others. So, example, I give this all the time. If I say that I love my queen, right? If I say I love my queen, my wife, so I say I love my queen. You know what people do? Somebody might hear that and go, "Man, I really like that message," and they go to their friends, and they're like, "Man, I listened to this dude named Kofi. He was spitting some real game about queens." They say, "Yo, what was he saying?" He was like, "Yeah, man, he was saying that we should love our queens and that he loves all queens." And while I might agree to those things, that's not the context I was talking about. Because if I was talking about my wife, my queen, then my queen requires certain things that no other queen might require, because she's not equal to any other queen. She's not the same as any other queen. Even if you want to make her a standard, she's not the same. So if you're trying to use things like my wife is into foraging, my wife is a herbalist, my wife has a certain way as far as her communicative skills that are outstanding. However, they're her communicative skills. So if you were to try and take that and say I'm gonna copy and paste on another sister, you would be um, you would be in a very bad position, because you would not be able to take care of your sister correct, because you're trying to take something and apply something that I said, which is great, but you're not but you're actually but what you're doing is you're trying to reinterpret. You're trying to change what I said, and the second that you try to reinterpret it, you are in fact lying, because interpretation is exactly what I meant. Thank you, Sister Deja. Interpretation means you have to say exactly what I meant, the language that I meant, the culture that I was coming out of, the person I was discussing. All those things go into proper interpretation, right? There's only one interpretation. There are many applications, right? So now what we now if you go deeper into it, and we won't go extremely deep after this, we do teach this stuff and everything in Black's Law Dictionary and sovereignty. But that's why I told people being sovereign is not just a piece of paper. It's how you live your whole life, right? But here's another term of what you're probably more talking about. If this person is, if you're still on, whoever that was a Stoic, I believe. Look at the word construction. Construction is a term of a wider scope than interpretation. For while the hitter is concerned only with ascertaining the sense and meaning of the subject matter, the former, or I'm sorry, the latter rather, but the former may also be directed to explaining the legal effects and consequences of the instrument in question. Hence, interpretation precedes construction. So what you're talking about now is more construction. How do I take interpretation and use it to construct something? Construction is based off, but interpretation is narrow. Interpretation, it is what it is, right? Like construction, I can take interpretation and do this and that or whatever. So interpretation is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. You use that to be able to build, right? But a squared plus b squared equals c squared. A has to be interpreted correctly, b must be interpreted correctly, c must be interpreted correctly. If they are not interpreted correctly, and if it gets us a value of over 180 degrees, if we're talking about the triangle or whatever, we're going to have an issue, right? If you've got a triangle and you've got more degrees than 180, or you have less degrees than 180 in your triangle, right, with all three angles coming together to be added, we got a problem here, right? Because it's supposed to always get 180, right? So the interpretation of A, B, and C have to be correct, right? Or X, Y, and Z, whatever. Now, once you finish that, then what do? We say, okay, now that we've got a triangle, now we can take that and use that to construct. We can build on that, but the interpretation must be correct first. And a lot of people are trying to, once again, take interpretation and make it whatever they want. I want A to be whatever. I want B to be whatever. I want C to be whatever. I say that I say that, you know, I say that I'm a high value man. What is the interpretation of a high value man? What makes your value greater than another human being's value? Is it that you're more valuable than somebody else, or is it that somebody's not aware of their value? There we go, right? But what makes you think that? Why is it that you think, for example, that Bill Gates is greater than your brother, your sister at your house? Right? Real question. What is it that makes you think that Bill Gates is greater than your brother or your sister? Is it just because he has fiat cash? Is it because he got a bunch of land? Is it because that he was part of a movement as far as technology? Well, why is it that you would even think that? What's the interpretation? It's our pleasure, Denise. What you see what I'm saying? Misinterpretation, but the interpretation is coming from somebody else's value system as well. So it's easy to misinterpret when you don't recognize that you're having a language issue. Amen. Thanks, babe. Yeah. So that's a great point my wife just brought up. There is a perceived value of things, and then there is an actual value of things. And your perception of value, not even just your perceived value, but your perception of what of the word value is. So I guess technically that's perceived value, right? So your perceived value, how you perceive value, is not actual value. It comes from somebody else's prism. You believe that because other people say that a trophy wife is the standard, you get with your wife and you keep looking for her to be a trophy because you perceive what somebody else told you. This is where misogyny starts to come into. Right? This is when biblical principle starts to have, we have to have a conversation. Your perceived value of misogyny comes from a place in which you believe, hear what I'm saying? You believe that people who thought that it was okay, Caesar, Julius Caesar, who's supposed to be the standard and all this stuff. And people talk about they study Caesar, they study Julius Caesar, Augustus Caesar, they study Marcus Aurelius, they study all these different people. That's if that's your standard, these people believed it was okay to have more sexual activity with their male counterparts and with these little boys. And Julius Caesar actually was clowned because he actually was the person that apparently was the person that was getting, penetrated, for lack of a better word. um, but they did that, but then they made sure, on the side they took care of their wives. They were down low. It wasn't even down low. Now you call it a down low brother, right? And you say that's disgusting, this and that. Back then, that was the cost of doing business. That was the cost of being a human being. That was the cost of being a Roman. That's what that was, right? But you perceive today that Julius Caesar set some kind of standard. That Julius Caesar is an amazing person because he's, even though he's not known as it, he's technically the first Caesar. And not technically, I would say that unofficially he was the first Caesar. He got killed because he had gotten too high up. And then because of them killing him, his own, basically his own, son of his love interest, basically, one of his side pieces, he left, all of his stuff for him. And Augustus Caesar becomes the guy. I'm sorry, my wife said we perceive the value of money as an actual thing when really it's dirty rags. Yeah. Like, think about that. The thing that you say rules the world, money rules the world. There's a lot of people that don't even want to touch it unless they have gloves on. Yeah, well, Brutus was another one. Brutus was another one of Julius Caesar's side pieces, basically. Brutus was like raised by, so Brutus was raised by Julius Caesar, but basically Brutus was one of Julius Caesar's side pieces too. But that was the cost of doing business back then, right? But think about what my wife just said. We have this idea of money being something that rules the world, and the reality is that many people would not even touch money. Many people don't want cash in their pocket, and if they do, it's got to be wrapped up really well. A lot of people, when you go to the store, right, you see them counting money, doing stuff, they putting gloves on and stuff. Why? Because because you get sick messing around with money all day. A lot of this stuff that people are talking about and all these different things or whatever, it's interesting. They wanted you to do this and stay away from this and not go here and not go there, but they never told you, hey, with COVID and everything, you probably want to check your cash. You probably want to make sure that you're not using cash like that, because you probably, if anything's spreading stuff, it's going to be your cash. Right. But we have a perceived thing. So the misandry and the misogyny, I want to get back and focus on that real quick. And we might take a little break here because I'm realizing that as I'm in this area, I haven't gotten anything to to eat early, anything I can take up to the room or something to eat later, and that might end up being an issue where I at least need to be able to eat my food or whatever, But these are the things that we're not really aware of, we're not really thinking about, we're not really thoughtful of, we're not really appreciative of, we're not really thinking about, right? Oh, okay, thanks, babe. um, okay, well then I'll stay in position. I wasn't trying to say anything out loud, but thank you, I appreciate it. I was just thinking out loud. Sorry. Appreciate the love. My wife loves me very much. I thank you. I was figuring, probably gonna rest up. So it's been a long last couple of days. Um, but yeah, these are the things that we're not thinking about as far as misogyny, misandry. Um, Even that interaction, there's probably somebody who's like, "Oh wow, his wife said she's gonna come get him a plate." Patriarchy. There's somebody out there that thinks that. There's somebody out there who thinks that being masculine is toxic. There's quite a few people, right? Like that's not something new. There's quite a few people out here who believe that. There's quite a few people out here have you ever thought about this when a wife steps up? This happens a lot on social media. A wife will step up and say that men need to be protected, or maybe your man's not hearing you because this and that, the third, or all this or whatever. And that as soon as she does that, a whole bunch of women who are usually not wives as well, or are people who have a ring on their finger, but just because you got a ring doesn't mean you're qualified to be a wife. We've talked about that before too, that there's qualifications. Are you pre-qualified for marriage? A lot of people don't even think about that. But you got to recognize like that there's a lot of people who are trying their hardest to drive a wedge, not just in between you and your spouse, but in between you and the Most High. And the family is the biggest piece, and that's why misogyny and misandry is important to have a conversation about, not through somebody else's prism, but through what it actually is, right? If misogyny has us at a level to where if misogyny has us at a level to where um, we we are so watch this. I think because we have a whole thing on misogyny. I think on our having been let us we believe series, and we bring it up all the time. Misogyny is something that we need to be aware of. Like this, we need to be the the gatekeepers of our culture. Because if we keep our culture, if we recognize our culture, if we think about our culture, if we lift up our culture, if we progress in our culture, if we protect our culture, misogyny doesn't get in because misogyny is not our culture. I think if I could just start focusing on that, we can come to the taking our leave a lot sooner. Um, and all these things we're talking about, I think we've made it a point to show how culture and lack of culture and taking on other people's culture can really mess up what you're doing. So at this point, I think now we have to start saying to ourselves and thinking to ourselves and talking to ourselves and having this conversation that says, instead of us saying that we should take on feminist ideals, we should figure out, why do we need feminism if we're together in our culture? That's why getting together, living together, growing together, talking to each other, visiting each other, etc. This is why it's so important, right? This is why we're trying to come out and meet people. And I'm not saying that everybody can or this and that, but this is why we're going to try. And every once in a while, even if we know where you are, we might stop on the way when we're going to this place or that place. We might stop in and say hello, something, because to give people hope that it's okay for us to be together. And by the way, a lot of us are close enough to where we should be meeting up on a regular basis anyways. And it don't got to just be on a Saturday. It can be just saying hello to each other. It can be, 10 people can meet up and say hello without me having to be part of it. What you say? TJS, no man and woman, 50% equally. What does that mean? What does that even mean? I don't comprehend. TJS, no man and woman, 50% equally. Can you spell it out for me? Because I don't even know how to address it. No offense. I legit don't know how to address that. And to let you know before you address it real quick, I don't know if you've been on the whole conversation or not. Let me just put it to you like this. We already made this clear. We don't believe in equality because no two people that have ever existed on the planet are equal to each other. So we believe that men and women should be respected as men and women, and that every man should be treated as a the puzzle piece he is in humanity, and every woman should be treated as a puzzle piece that she is in humanity. Um, we agree that there should be roles, and it's okay for people to have roles considering their culture. And we're also talking about our cultural ideals. So if somebody has a different culture, this is where you get gender or genre from. If somebody has a different culture or gender or whatever, then it's okay for you to have that different culture, that different gender, et cetera, if that's the style of your culture. But in our culture, we have something that's different. So yeah, but I'm not sure what you mean. Um, so we're not there. You said you already answered. You okay? I don't know. But thank you. I guess for the comment. But this, we have to get to a place to where it's like, what are we? What are we? Right? Like, we have to be the gatekeepers of our culture. We have been so in tune with everybody else's culture, and it's been messing with our mind. And we see in everybody else's culture that it causes them to fight one another. Why would we get in the fight? Why would we want to take on things that cause them to fight with one another? Why would we want that to be our culture? We have enough fight amongst other people. Why would we want to fight amongst ourselves? Why would we want to bring in something that already demeans you? Right? So in their culture, in their culture, right? In their culture, feminism is there because they say that men, patriarchal society, patriarchy, men hate women, blah blah, this and that or whatever, right? In their culture, that's what they say, and they say so. Don't talk about black women. Talk about all women, right? Like, don't talk about black lives. Talk about all lives. Don't talk about the hood. Talk about all of us. And but we have a problem. We have an issue with it. Oh, oh, okay. So we have an issue with this due to the fact that we're talking about black lives, all lives, or this and that or whatever. We got a problem that happens. We do. We have a problem with these things because now when we're having this conversation, um, we don't recognize that 1851, seeing all this stuff in the feminist movement, and they go back to the sisters. Well, sisters, Sojourner Truth, she tried to join up with the feminist movement. Like, I'm not making that up. Sojourner Truth, she did. She tried her best to line up with the feminist movement, and she had to come up with a speech that they didn't even want her to give. She rode and got to where she needed to. They were having a convention. I can't even remember this was in Ohio. Was it Cleveland? Was it Akron? Or something like it was in Ohio somewhere. But she got over there, and they had this women's event, women's meeting, and she got up and she only gave a 5-minute speech because they didn't want her to speak in this at all. That's her speech is said. It's called "Ain't I a Woman," and the reason why it's called "Ain't I a Woman" is because go read that speech. We've read it a few times before. Maybe at some point we'll actually just do a whole session on just "Ain't I a Woman" because it's powerful stuff. But it's only 5 minutes long, and the reason is because they didn't want her to come in the first place. They told her not to come. The white women told her not to come by that social construct, and they told her not to come because they said that your fight is not our fight. These are the same women that are going to get older, and you're going to lift them up, and you're going to say, thank. People are so thankful to God for these women. You're thankful to the Susan B. Anthony who said that she would rather have her right arm cut off than that you be able to vote. Right? These are the women that give birth to people like the Margaret Sangers of the world, who literally said that not only with black people but with Jewish people, she felt that they needed to have birth control because they were terrible people. They would never get any better. They were not as smart. They were incorrect. And she said we even need to talk to the leaders, not just the government officials. She said we need to talk to the pastors. She knew where it was, right? With our people. Once again, Romans 10:2, we have a zeal. We as Israel, we have a zeal of Elohim. Even if we're off, we have a zeal for him. So she said, I know who the leaders are in their community. They're the spiritual leaders. They're always going to be the spiritual leaders. That's why a black man without spirituality, that's more dangerous than a black man who's a misogynist. Because a black man who without spirituality will not only be a misogynist, he will be somebody who you will destroy your people, will allow your people to be destroyed, and then will say it's your fault. Right? A black man in denialism is a man who's not in tune with his people and definitely not in tune with his DNA membrane. And yeah, I said that with my whole chest. If somebody got a issue with that, how you doing, Dennis? I mean that one. Right? Black men or black women, right? But a lot of our black women that are going to witchcraft or other things, they're leaving spirituality, or at least leaving their forms. Because even when they're talking about spirituality, a lot of times they're not even dealing with our spirituality. Like even when you see them and it's like, yeah, I'm gonna take these bones and I'm gonna do this, or I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna rub it together and I'm gonna put it out. A lot of that stuff that you're talking about are things where people had to mix a whole bunch of different religions and stuff together, just like Christianity is, to be able to survive. And so, hey, one of the ways that they did it, they had different tribes that did this and this and this. They just put it all together, and now you call it Vodou or Voodoo. And Vodou is a specific thing that comes from a specific place in West Africa. But a lot of people are treating Vodou or Voodoo like it's only Haitian slash thing, Creole slash Louisiana, New Orleans type thing. Oh, thanks, man. So like we have a lot of people doing a lot of odd things, and they're coming from a lot of odd places. They're not biblical places. They're not virtuous places. They're places of virtus. They're not places of virtus. They're not places of representing something that's greater. How you doing, brother TJ? Like we don't have the thing of like representing, something bigger than ourselves. We're in this position that we're trying to come in talking on a lot of stuff that has nothing to do with us. Once again, what is the cultural perspective? What is the context of it? We have facts without context. We have context without facts. Once again, we have a lot of facts without context. We have a lot of context without facts. So how do you address misandry or misogyny? One of the easiest ways you do so is you say, we as a people will be the gatekeepers of our own people. Right? Welcome back, Sister Cynthia. Right? We say we'll be the gatekeepers of our culture. Right? We'll be the gatekeepers of our own culture. Right? We will become and keep our own culture, our own community. It's okay. It's okay to do that. Right? We will become that gatekeeper. We will become that person that says it's all right for us to be able to speak to us and to speak for us and to speak through us. Right? Like these are the things that we don't want to have the conversations about, but those are real things. That should be a real desire. It's a real desire for everybody else, and we applaud everybody else. Why not applaud yourself for being a gatekeeper for your own? Right? Why not applaud? Why applaud everybody else for making sure that you keep things in a cultural perspective, but then you do not keep yourself in a cultural perspective. You don't keep your family in there. And if we were to do that, we would discover real quick. See, can I, like, since we've talked about this stuff before, it's almost like I'm trying to shut down certain things that we've had conversations about in the past that you can look up on YouTube. But I want to get to something real quick, and we're getting towards the end where we're going to take our leave, right? But I want to make sure that I address some of this, because if we can get certain things in these perspectives, we'll be in a different place. So when we speak to, I'm sorry, you said people having trouble living under correct cultural standards, used to obeying the beast system, right? And can I tell you something? When you keep your culture in place, you have to keep your husband and wife relationship in place. And when you keep your culture in place, it means that you have to keep your men and women in place. Now, I'm not saying in place as far as they have to once again bow down. I'm talking about, in order to keep a culture in place, you have to keep society. Like if there's going to be a societal norm, there has to be a society, a society, right? If there's going to be a social norm, then there has to be something that says this is normal in our social structure, right? So just by having a culture or a standard, it means that everybody has to get in line. Whether you want to talk about Yashtil right now, Black folk right now, Moorish people right now, indigenous people right now, The problem is not so much. Um, the problem for us is not so much misogyny or misandry. The problem is that we have nothing to gatekeep. We have no standard. Like all the stuff that we're talking about, I think we made it clear at this point. We can go down, and if people have questions, comments, concerns about this stuff or whatever, we thank you so much. We appreciate you, and we look forward to being able to have more conversation with you all. But in reality, um, it's about whatever. Like the reality of the matter is that we don't have a standard. Thank you. We don't have we don't have anything to defend. Okay, check this out. Would you say, see, can I give an example? I'm kind of stuttering because I see it in my head. I don't know if I can convey this, so I'm going to do my best to be obedient to this, right? If I say Chinese culture, you think about food, don't you? If I say Chinese culture, you think about characters, right? The writing, don't you? If I say Chinese culture, even if it's not necessarily so that everybody is, in your mind, you think stuff like Kung Fu, right? If I say Chinese culture, guess what you also think about? You think about what people's facial features are. If I say Chinese culture, guess something else that you think about. If I say Chinese culture, guess what? You think about how husbands and wives interact. You might not, it might not be your first thought. It might not be your initial thought. It might not be your focal thought. But you think about how husbands and wives interact. If I were to say to you, imitate a Chinese father, even if it would be very racist the way you do it or whatever we would call it, you could probably do it, right? It would be and what would it be based off of? It would be based off of your experiences. It would be based off of what you saw on television. It would be based off of what people were telling you. You want to use this one? We can switch on here. I use the one. You want to take this one too? Okay. So if I were to say, right, but if I were to say, show me a Chinese, your version, explain to me what a Chinese mother does or a Chinese grandmother does. If I were to say walk like an old Chinese person, etc., within the culture, there are certain standards that they have. If I were to say sit down or kneel down, I forget what it's called, but it's like a stance where you kneel or whatever, right? Okay, Asian squat. If I were to say do an Asian squat, a lot of people, even if you couldn't do it, you would know how to attempt it, right? But you would know. If I were to say to you, Italian culture, once again, you think about food, you would think about an accent, even if you're like, oh, da 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 da, fugazi, blah blah, right? Even if you don't know any of the language, right? Even if you don't know simple ones like chow or anything like that, you would do certain things. If I said Italian culture, you would think about guys that on the street. If I said imitate an Italian father, even if it was the Sopranos, you would know how to do something. If I were to say imitate an Italian mother, even if all you had was the Sopranos, you would know enough about an Italian mother, right? But in your culture, what you've been trained to do, if I say, what does your culture say about your people? You've been trained to say, oh, we don't have our own food. You've been trained to say we don't have our own characters. That's why we teach about Hebrew characters and stuff, but we don't have our own characters. We don't even think, if you're in certain parts of the diaspora, you don't even know anything about your own language. How do you interpret without a language, right? By definition. And then if I were to say, show me what a Hebrew or Israelite or black or Moorish or whatever, show me what that father is. You wouldn't necessarily know how to do that within the prism of a culture because we don't have a standard. This is why it's important. Like all the stuff we're talking about, misogyny, misandry, it disappears when you become the gatekeeper of your own culture, right? Like once you have a culture, it's easy to guard. And you guard your fathers, you guard your mothers. Hello, Sister Miko. Right. And once again, everybody, we're in Chicago right now, actually. So we'll be here 27th, 28th, which is today and tomorrow. We'll be in the D late on the 29th, but we'll definitely be there all day on the 30th if you want to come out and say hello and spend some time with us. Hopefully you're ready to. Right. And so we look forward. I think we're supposed to meet everybody here at 7 p.m. Eastern New York time, 6 p.m. Central time, which is the time here. But yeah, so we look forward to saying hello to everybody. We said hello to some people already on the way. Sister Beverly and Sister Barbara, we had a great time saying hello with you guys. And we look forward to trying to meet more and more of you. And hopefully you guys are getting ready for October 14th through the 16th. And I think we figured out the issues that we were having with some of the stuff, like the last bit of issues and stuff. I think we kind of were able to discuss some of those things. So we'll have some stuff sent to you guys real soon. And thank you for your patience with that. But yeah, it's a cultural, there's a cultural thing that's going on. We don't have a culture to protect. And when you don't have a culture to protect, then how do you protect fathers and mothers without culture? It's impossible. Right? How do you protect mothers and fathers without culture? What is a mother or father without a culture? See, I would see. I know we use the term, and look, I'm not trying to beat people up, right? Because it doesn't really matter either way you say this, whether you say I live outside the box, I live inside the box. I like to think about the box as being something that you go inside of and it's eternal and it's actually different and you think it's going to be boxed in, but it actually gives you the ability to go to like the universe and do this and blah, blah, right? So I like to actually think about being inside the box. And what I mean by that, as far as this context is that if we're not boxed into what roles are. So we don't have something that says that this is how we secure our women. And like you go to Mexico and you best not mess with somebody's wife because this is how they secure their woman. Like it's no, right? You go to Paraguay, there's a specific way that they protect their women. You go to Choctaw people and Cherokee people, there's a specific way that you're supposed to, they try to deny us that, but there is a way we still kind of know about. You go to Ghana, you best not do certain things with somebody else's wife or blah blah or to their children, etc. Right? But you come to certain places in the diaspora, right? You go to England, right? Men are supposed to do this. If you say this about my woman, we gonna fight you. You go to France, right? Men and women are supposed to be this. If you do this, we gonna fight you, right? Or you're right. You go to wherever most of us are in the diaspora, though, and we don't have a culture that we protect. Like, how do look? I'm trying to take our lead, right? Uh, I might leave this on a salah for a moment because I do need to grab. I'm gonna grab something to drink real quick before they shut down everything. But I'm gonna just ask a quick. I just would ask you a quick question, right? Just real quick question. You ready? Real quick question. How do you defend something and you don't know what it is? We're just gonna leave that there for a second. I'm gonna grab something to drink. But I'm gonna come right back to this salah. If I don't know what something is, and if I don't know where something is, if I don't know when something's supposed to show up, if I don't know how something's supposed to operate, right? If I don't know why something is supposed to operate, how do you defend it? Right? How do you defend it? You said you're curious. Who is the we that does not have culture? Well, I'm talking about my specific culture, my specific people. America, everything comes from a culture. Everything that happens. I'm talking about my specific people that we don't have a culture to protect because we're busy allowing other people to tell us what our culture is supposed to be. So once again, I'm going to come back on that if you want to stick around for a second and be patient with me. I'm not going to be around too much longer when I come back. Well, you know what? It's pretty much time to take our leave. Let's do it like this, right? So once again, like I was saying, we are involved with a lot of people who are telling us what our culture is supposed to be. Right? Once again, we determined this, that people who don't know about your culture keep getting your culture wrong. Moses went down the Nile River. No, he didn't. He was placed in there. See a reed. Somebody came and saw him automatically. He did not go through crocodiles and stuff. Oh yeah, the firmament. He created the firmament. No, no such thing as a firmament. Firmament is a Greek god. Somebody put that in there. It used to be a Laquia or a Kia, right? But you think of that as being a cultural thing. That's not our culture. Somebody told you that Yah brought down the light and showed us all this light. No, he gave you enlightenment. because the sun, the moon, the stars aren't created until Yom Dalet, or the fourth period of time, the fourth day. Same thing with husbands and wives, right? Who told you about husbands and wives in your culture? What does your culture say about husbands and wives? What is Israel? What is an Israelite? What is a Cushite? What is a Kemetic? What is a person who's put? What is a Canaanite? What is a Phoenician? What is a Carthaginian way that husbands and wives interact? Salah. Who told you about yourself, about your culture? Have you ever defended your culture, or have you defended what everybody else told you? I'll be right back. Salah. All right. Just gonna grab something to drink real quick. All right. So once again, question: How do you how do you defend something? Right? How do you defend something that's not yours? Right? Have you been defending something that's not yours? Right? I think at this point we don't really have too much more to say, right? Unless there's questions, comments, and concerns. But how do you defend something that's not your, excuse me, something that is not yours? How do you do so? See, that's the issue. If somebody talks, once again, how do you talk about how, so once again, if we're gonna talk about feminism, then you can't talk like sisters. Look, we need to make sure that our sisters are protected. I say this all the time: the black woman is the most unprotected creature, not just person on the planet. Our black women are the most educated women on the planet, but make less money than anybody else, especially in certain places in society, right? that's that's unacceptable. But once again, you have no culture to protect. You don't have even land. Like, how do you have a land that's right? Without land, how do you even make sure that there has to be a culture of work? Like, where are your businesses? Not just businesses like, oh, okay, see, comprehend. Look, we obviously believe in social media, right? And virtual space and virtual real estate, but things that are virtual, they're not real. They're not as real. That's why we're trying to come together, right? Like, because we don't have, now imagine if we can do this with something that's virtual, imagine what we can do with something that's physical. Right? If we can do this with virtual, imagine what we can do with the physical. But we don't have business. So we have, when we say somebody's got a business, we just say, oh yeah, somebody can just send me this, send me this, send me this, send me this. But where do you have something set up to where your sisters can actually go outside and see each other every day, and that brothers can be lifting up, and that we have a society that allows it to where we should probably do a lot of this already virtually even, but to where before your dollar touches somebody else's hands, it touches your community's hands 50, 60 times first. Once again, in order to defend your ideas, your septs, your precepts, the environment, your sept, the ideas, and the concept, becoming one with ideas, before you can even consider protecting the concept or even creating a concept, you have to first have something that it can be established on. Even Romans chapter 111, before you get into all the other stuff, Romans 111 in first chapter starts off with, I'm writing this that you may be established. Before we can talk about being saved, you must first establish something. This is why before Yahshua healed, he first talked about the kingdom, right? He said that means we need to start acting cooperatively to form businesses. Yeah, right. And even the businesses, once again, what's the cultural aspect of the business, right? Don't sell me. A lot of people go out and just sell me the same thing that somebody else sells me. Well, you're not giving me my culture, right? Give me something that's mine, right? The Chinese person goes to the Chinese restaurant, they expect Chinese food. The Chinese person goes to the dry cleaners, they expect the person behind there to be Chinese. The Chinese person goes there, they expect to hear Mandarin. The Chinese person sends their child to school, they expect Mandarin to be taught at the school. The Chinese person starts to own things, they expect to see Chinese characters all over Chinatown, right? It's not a bad thing. Once again, we're the people that are afraid of gentrification because we tie gentrification to somebody else is always gentrifying our things. But where is your gentrification at? Right? Where is your gentrification at? Do you see what I'm saying? Everybody's talking about gentrification, and we always talk about it as an evil thing because we don't know how to do it, or we just don't do it. But where is your gentrification? Why is it that your neighborhood don't look like you? And see, why is it that you think when you say your neighborhood looks like you, why do you think that your neighborhood looking like you has to mean that somebody has to spray paint or tag, the side of a train? I love looking at some good tags. Some great, like there's some great artists out there that done a lot of great things in the hip hop community as far as tagging, and it's become this thing now that everybody wants to partake in. But why is it that you think that tagging the side of a building is more your culture than owning the building? Right? If you get your culture in order, misogyny and misandry starts to go away because everybody whose culture is in order to protect the culture, you must protect the mother and the father. Do you hear what I'm saying? Can I say that again? In order to protect the culture, you must protect the mother and the father. We're very good at protecting everything else except mothers and fathers. There's a lot of wives out there, or women that should be wives, or people that should have been protected, right? But once again, we didn't even teach people that you're supposed to be pre-qualified. Why is it that you know how to be pre-qualified to drive a car, but you don't know how to be pre-qualified to make sure that a marriage works? You see what I'm saying? If you protect the culture, you protect the mother and father, right? If the mother has a place to where she knows that she's going to have protection, she's going to know that she has finances, she knows that she's going to have a community behind her, she knows that she can be herself, she knows that she doesn't have to do this and that or whatever, right? She knows that she doesn't have to be always strong, independent, and frozen in the state of fear of what's going to happen to her if she doesn't have to get everything done. You actually will begin to see a brand new wife pop up, a brand new idea that you're not just dealing with a strong. Think about this. There are all these women that talk about strong, independent black women, even ones that are married, will say, I'm a strong, independent black woman, but never address themselves as wives. But when the culture is protected, she begins to address herself as a wife. She only can address herself through the prism that she's shown, or the prison that she's allowed in. And you're dealing with somebody else's thing. Once again, we don't have a culture. Why is it that your men feel like everything that happens to them is toxic? Because somebody else who's trying to fight their man, their husband, what they're going through, they're trying to fight them about them not getting their cut. And then they're telling us, right? So Journal Truth said, Ain't I a woman? 1851. She was saying, you won't treat me like a woman now, right? What's her face? Who's the one that everybody loves so much? Who's the one that I was just saying earlier about vote? Susan B. Anthony. Everybody loves Susan B. Anthony. Susan B. Anthony said, "I would give my right arm before I would make sure that a black person would vote before me." But black women be out here talking about Susan B. Anthony's their friend. Susan B. Anthony couldn't stand you, right? And I'm not saying that every white person is evil, that we're not doing it. But what we're saying is we're not going to act like our women don't need to be protected. But you can't protect them if you don't have a culture. The culture is what protects your husband. The culture is what protects your wife. And because you don't know your culture, you're protecting values that don't protect you. Right? If you want to get an abortion, ladies, that's your choice. You can do what you want. What I'm saying is don't do it because Margaret Sanger said you're supposed to do it. Don't lift her up as the patron saint. Because she's the one that said that you needed to do it because she said that you as a woman really weren't a woman. And she said she was going to go and make deals with your preachers to tell them that they said it was okay. They look the other way. Now, I'm not saying that if you want to go ahead and do that, you deal with whatever, right? You deal with whatever consequences that you feel are great or evil or whatever. You deal with those things. That's your decision. But let's not act like there's no responsibility of at least seeing why this has happened. Let's get past your Republican, Democrat, communist, Marxist, libertarian, whatever value system, and let's go into something where we're human beings. Like, let's have a conversation about the fact that your humanity is taken every time your culture is taken. Culture is extremely important. Thank you for all the love, by the way. I've been missing it, right? But I've, it's like we don't have this thing where we're even going to be honest about the conversation. Misogyny and misandry is happening because of cultural misidentification. And I wish, look, I wish I was the Most High because, but guess what? When I say that, I can't even finish that sentence. I was going to say, I wish I was the Most High because then maybe I could save the world. But you know what? The Most High says everybody got free will. You have a right to choose whatever you want, whatever consequences that come with it. We're not here to save the world. We're here to what? Have people that are in system realize that they don't have to be of it, right? You can be in the system every day. You got to go to work, fine. You feel like you still got to do the 9 to 5 thing, fine. You feel like you can't wear your clothes, do this, or start your business, fine. You feel like you can't homeschool, fine. All these things, but at least have something that you can come out of every once in a while. Where's your Wusa moment? Where's your moment? I'm sorry. You said meanwhile 150,000 house, one in the hood smaller than 150,000 elsewhere. Yeah. So like at some point you said investment in creating community and divest from renting in the hood. Yeah. But we don't think about those things. But that's, if you have those things in place, I'm telling you, those things go away. All these people that you're talking about that have, you think, by the way, because once again, even America has put out statistics to show you that black men as a whole, not as a or as a majority, obviously not as a whole, because nobody's 100% righteous, right? No person, no people, no community is 100% righteous. But as a society, or I'm sorry, as a majority, rather, percentage wise, black men, especially in America, black men are more involved in their children's lives, whether they live with the spouse, they live with the girlfriend, or they are not connected except for through the children. They are by percentage more invested than any other culture, but they still tell you that every black man is trash. That's not your culture. Obviously, there's cognitive dissonance, double-minded. Something's not making sense, right? Obviously, something's not correct with that assessment. If we know that the same people that will tell you that will say you the numbers. The only reason why you identify that, though, and the only reason why you're still having that fight, is because you are not trying to even make that as part of a culture. Like, your culture, instead of making your culture saying black men are trash, black women are trash, have it set up in your culture to where, hey, you know what? We take care of our children even through all the hell we got to go through. And anybody that won't be part of that culture, you are not somebody who we would allow to be consistent in that. Now, see, this is where it gets into, somebody might say I'm going too far, or somebody might say you're trying to be a black nationalist or whatever. But let's keep it 100. Let's have, honest conversation. Okay? Let's keep it 100. Let's keep it a buck, right? In Haiti, when they finished fighting the French, Toussaint Louverture and Jean-Jacques and many others, Dudley Bookman and others, when they finish winning in Haiti, they do something that's profound. They make, as far as their culture and their constitution, they make black the standard. And I don't just mean that as far as like, oh, it's nice and everything. No, I'm talking about noir, en français, comment est-ce qu'on dit noir en anglais is black. So in other words, how do you say, noir in English, you say black. So they make black the standard. What do? They say that anybody, including German Hessians, who decide to fight on their behalf against the French, against the Spanish, against the English, against everybody, because they were beating the brakes off of everybody. They decide to make that the standard. They write in their constitution that anybody who fought for this is black. Now, it's not a new thing contextually, but it's actually something that's new as far as writing out these, what we now call constitutions, out of this Western mindset. I'm sorry, Cynthia said they're the dominant race and stats of serial killers, but replay the lab, we're killing ourselves more. Yeah, right. So, but getting back just to this real quick, and that's a great point to Cynthia, but I'm just saying, getting back to this real quick. If you look at it, the Haitians, they say we're going to make noir or black the standard. So if you're German, which means you're by the social construct you're white, but you fought with us, they actually say you are by definition black because in order to be Haitian, you must be black. So, but the Germans, once again, by the social construct, you call them white. The Germans are not noir or black; they are blanc, right? But they say that then you're not the same as the blanc petit or the blanc garçon or all these other people that were many different things in between. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, basically they had people called big whites or blanc and little whites, blanc petit. And so those were people who had certain positions than everybody else, depending on how much you've been raped and your children have been born different colors and all this other stuff. They put you in there, right? But they said that basically, if you fought with us, if you basically were about what we were about, if you're about the culture, then we'll actually say that that is what makes you black. Now, watch this. If you fought against us, if you were a Sambo, if you were somebody that was mixed and you thought you were better than us because the mixed black folks sometimes who were allowed to have slaves because there were like 40 something different sects of people, right? So if you were one of the ones that fought against us, oh, you blanc, you white. That's how they did that. Like, oh, we don't say you white. What, right? Because they were saying we're the standard. So when they were protecting themselves, they put themselves in the forefront. They put themselves in the actual constitution. If they were going to build a constitution for Haiti, then they had to go away from blanc and they had to go towards noir. It was a guarantee. They had to do it. How do you make sure that you protect and go to the next level if you don't make sure that you put yourself even in the constitution? Right? Like they had to put themselves in the constitution. They had to put who? Themselves in the Constitution. And see how we talk about law and Constitution and the Bible is nothing more than law and case study. You got to know how Constitution works. You got to know what interpretation is. You got to know there's only one interpretation, but many applications. Now, here's the problem. Whose interpretation are you using? Are you using your interpretation? Stop trying to say, oh no, I'm going to take what these people say about me and this is how I'm going to interpret it. No, what you're doing is you're taking what people say about you and you're trying to apply it, but you're still applying negativity. If somebody said that you ain't nothing because of the color of your skin, but you're going to use their words and their will and their talent and their effort and their energy and their movements to be able to try and make yourself free, you're not protecting yourself. So we're busy out here not protecting our women and not protecting our men. Every society you go to in China, there's a culture that says this is how we protect ourselves, including our husbands and our wives. If you go to Japan, they say this is the culture that we have, and this is how we are able to protect our husbands and our wives. If you go to England, they say this is a culture that we have, and this is how we protect our husbands and our wives. Right? If you go, if you go to Iraq, as war torn as Iraq and Iran are, and as war torn as Kuwait is, and as war torn as Afghanistan is, and all the stuff they want you to believe. Guess what? When you go over there, even if you don't like it, I'm not saying it's always perfect, but I'm saying when you go over there, guess what they have? They have a culture that says this is what a husband and a wife is, and this is how we protect. We have a culture that we protect, and we have something that protects our husbands and our wives. No matter what you say, right? You can call it a narrative. Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, you can even say it's a narrative in some cases, right? But they're protecting it. There's something that when you come here, this is who we are. This is what we look like, and it's okay, right? There's a standard. There's a standard. This is what Japanese hair is. Like if you say like you go to Korea, this is what Korean hair is, right? You go to Mexico. This is what a Mexican girl. We'll make fun of it. Right, I remember comedians and everybody making fun of this as I came up. We'll make fun of it. That there will be you go to a dry or a laundromat, and you see a little girl walking around and skipping around in a Mexican dress, and we used to make fun of it. But you know what that girl was getting that you weren't getting? She was getting her culture from when she was a little girl. She comprehended and understood that this dress is a part of who I am. And guess what? No matter how far removed she is from Mexico, her daughter will have the same dress because it doesn't matter if she's on the land. In her heart, she has the culture because the culture was protected for her as a little girl. It was what she is. And every time she put on that dress, guess what her dad said? Her dad came over. Her dad said, you know what? That's a beautiful dress that you have right there, because he wanted to make sure that she comprehended the culture. Right. And that son that you thought was spoiled, and those little babies, and you'd be like, man, why are they so grown and they're in the culture and this and that, right? Or they're so grown. You got these 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, and they're walking around in the stroller, this and that. But in their culture, they baby them up like that, right? But also to get it, if that little boy is gonna grow up and have to work, and I quote, like a Mexican, because we talk about their work ethic, right, as a people. So if he gonna grow up and he gonna work like a Mexican, then I'm gonna spoil the mess out of him when he's a little boy. See, we got a culture that we don't have anything to protect, so we spoil the mess out of little boys, and then we tell them to get older and say you don't even got to have no business, you know, right? But if I'm gonna break your back to where you're gonna die early because you're gonna be working your behind off to make sure that people have whatever, you're gonna be walking around with a limp and stuff when you get older. That's something we even stereotypically think about Mexicans, is that they're supposed to have a limp when they get older and stuff because they work their behinds off, and because of certain things, like don't forget they come out of Spanish history, and Aztec people being mistreated and things like that as well. But if you're going to do that, then I expect, hey, right? So but as a little girl, she's gonna know, okay, I wear the dress. I get to do this. I speak a language. Even if I go to school and I speak English, when I come home, we speak. And by the way, depending on where I am, right, I'm not gonna go. If I go to Spanish class and they teach me old Spanish, that's fine and everything. I'll learn it. But when I go home, we don't speak old Spanish. We speak Mexican Spanish. Right? We speak Puerto Ricano over here, Mexicano over here, Cubano over here, right? Like we Dominicano over here. Like there's specific things that we are going to speak because the culture is protected. When you protect the culture, you protect the husband and the wife. You're training them because you're training them first in culture, right? I'm sorry, my wife said a woman had the nerve to tell me to put my 2-year-old down, saying that he's too big to hold. Yeah, you know. But in our culture, like you wrap them babies up and you hold them there. Now everybody else trying to take your culture and telling you need to do what they do. And you said, my wife said, I said, if a lot of these brothers had been held, yeah, things would be different for our people. And used to be held, right? And there are stories in Africa of brothers, and sisters, little girls, little boys being breastfed, till 3 years old, weaning. Some people not getting weaned off. I mean, there were extreme examples of it, but I mean, not being weaned off until they 5, 6, 7. And by the way, if you're drinking milk, the milk basically is your meat, so to speak. And then when you get weaned off of meat, guess what? You don't look for carnivorous stuff as much either. So the longer you breastfeed, a lot of those people usually aren't going to be eating as much meat. Because the longer you breastfeed, guess what happens? The longer somebody breastfeeds, the more that they're having that meat or whatever. And if they have vegetables even added to it and stuff like that. But while you're breastfeeding, you're usually not eating meat at the same time, at least not as much, because they kind of do this. It's canceled out. Why? So why do we say don't spoil them all our lives? Says to person, you don't deserve that. Yeah, and to spoil really is a bad term. Like as long as you're not having somebody where they're going to develop bad habits, right? To spoil is talking about this is something you can't eat from. So we don't want to teach our children things into a place where they don't have any ability to do certain things that they should be able to do. But being nice to a child is not spoiling a child. There are some times when you got to challenge them, especially like when you come to little boys, because then sometimes now that could be something different. Or little girls, sometimes there's times that you got to challenge, like they're thinking that they're gonna get away with everything just because they're a girl, or just because they're pretty. Like we do a lot of that in society right now. That's spoiling. But for a father to dote upon his daughter, and for a mother to dote upon her son, is not spoiling, right? In any way, shape, or form. I wouldn't use that term, right? My wife and I total agreement on that. Cynthia said they are being societal, trained on how to be rather than diverting to our to culture for the knowledge. Yeah, and that's really what goes on is we don't have, once again, what is the culture like for real, for real. When I say societal norm for us as a diaspora, when I say what is the Israelite societal norm, this is what we've been learning more than anything else. When I say what is the Israelite societal norm, people begin to say, I don't know. You said it's sickening how we train little girls to think their value is based on looks. Yeah, that's very bad too, right? But once again, it's cultural. You're dealing with somebody else. And by the way, it gets deeper on deeper levels. You said we need to look at what we have in common throughout the diaspora, which will connect us. Well, yeah, but once again, even in diaspora, like once again, we're talking about forming a culture, right? Getting back to it used to be that there were certain things we would never think. Like we would never, if you go to, for example, if you go over to Africa, you're not gonna. I'm not saying there's nobody over there that's dealing with this, but you don't really see, especially for Africa. 'Cause remember, everybody in Africa is not African, just like everybody in America is not American, right? People don't like to admit that or talk about that. But if you were to go over to Africa, you're not going to see homosexuality like that, like you see over here. You're not. And if you ask their government officials about it, they're going to say that's not our problem. They're going to look at you weird, like why would you even bring that up? Even if other people want them to bring it up. Now, places like South Africa, maybe a little bit of Morocco, maybe a little bit of Egypt, because these are people that are in charge that aren't us. You see a little bit of that showing up, but you don't see that because it's not our culture. It's not that we hate these people if we find out that's what they are, as much as people will try to say, like, go to the extremes, where there are some people that have been mistreated heavily because of how they look, or their sexual associations are, uh, or what they're doing sexually with their bodies. But for the most part, like people will say over there, they're like, man, something's wrong. They treat it like mental health issue. They basically go, man, something's wrong with that person, but you got to love them, you got to pray for them. That's how they treat it. You said, for example, griot tradition was transcends time and distance. Sure, right, but we don't have that. We don't have that conversation. So, even like a griot, a lot of people don't know about jelly griot or what that is. If I were to say, if I say to the average person, if I say to the average person I'm a jelly, if I say to the average person I'm griot, etc., a lot of people don't comprehend what I'm talking about. So, you have to realize the position that a lot of us are in. You have to realize that you're the position that a lot of people are talking about, and we don't have a standard. So, of course, our women don't feel protected because where is the standard? But once again, like, what is the standard? What is the culture? Right. Once again, there's nothing wrong. But once again, if I say, what does that look like? If I say, what does that look like? If I say, this is why we're working on the land, right? Yah's land project, and we're building the land up. We're building on it. We're making sure that we construct things. We're making sure we have certain values, etc. Right? Because most people are not conditioned to think about what things would look like if it was just you. What is your definition of a woman even come from? Right? Why do you know what a woman is, but you don't know what Asha is? Why do you know what a son is, but you don't know what bar is or what sets the bar? Why do you know what a daughter is, but you don't know what bat is? Right? If you know what a bot is, you would start thinking about terms like, what is a robot? Why does your bot, your daughter, that's what a bot is, why is she supposed to be like a robot? See, other people know your terms and your value system better than you do. Why is your bot, your daughter, supposed to be like a robot? Why are we dealing with NASA and we don't know that the word NASA or NASA literally means to deceive? I'm saying all this stuff like to say, like, once again, to get back to the misogyny misandry, you're being mistreated as a people. It's not just as a man or a woman, right? And even like when you talk about a woman is a term of endearment, but in their culture, a woman is a don't call me woman. You said, are these words Yiddish? Some of those words are Yiddish. I'm talking about Paleo Hebrew though, so that goes before there was such thing as Yiddish. If we be honest, right? I'm talking about Avda. They'll say Ivri or Ivrit, which Ivrit or Avda people actually were West African, right? But nevertheless, they call them Beta Israel. But we're talking about actual, you know, Avda or Israelite words, what they initially meant, right? So I'm not talking about modern Hebrew. Modern Hebrew is a mix of Yiddish and German and Hebrew, and I always forget the other one. Or I've been forgetting the other one as of late. It's going to come back to me. However, like we don't recognize. So why do we know these terms? Why do we think that negro is a Spanish word, when negro is one of the most ancient terms that are out there to describe West African people? So when you say it's so-called Negro, no, if you West African, bro, you Negro. You ain't so-called. You're called because you are. And the word called is very interesting as well, because people don't even know the word called. It means to be invited. Over here right now, if I were to call somebody from across the room, I'm inviting them. That's what the word called means. So you're called to be who you are. You're invited to be who you are. You can choose to be it or not. But going back to what we were talking about as far as Haiti had it set up to where they said, we're going to put black in the Constitution. If you fought for us, not just if you look like us, if you fought for us, if you live like us, if you live the culture, if you're part of this experience, if you put your life on the line, if you're willing to defend this, then you are by definition black. But they had to have something that they made up. They literally created a constitution. And unlike what they did in the French Constitution, which was changing over and over again, and unlike they did with the Constitution of the United States of America, which has amendments, which means it changes over and over and over again, they said, first things first, we must ensure that our people are in there, specifically the way we look, the way we act, the way we talk, the way we speak. And people do this, but they do it on the slide. Right? I'm sorry. Cynthia said, I'm still growing my life quilt, as I call it. Don't steal my freeze, yo. Sister Bree said, just because someone has more melanin does not make them African. Melanated people come from all over. Well, yeah. And that's not something that we necessarily say on here. Right. But what I'm saying is, as far as constitutionally speaking, what they had as far as their constitutionally, they had something in there that says specifically, we're going to deal with black as anybody. Right. Black as anybody who fights for this. That's why people can be that. That's why it's a very Israelite concept, right? If you think about the fact that if you are grafted in, right? If you are grafted in, you are somebody that recognizes that the culture, Israel, the people of the culture, they must be what? Sealed. But then by you following the culture, it means you were grafted in. Grafted in is basically, in a sense, right, sewing something in or allowing something to attach naturally. A limb being put on the tree, a peach tree limb being put on the apple tree. If it's grafted in, tied together, and it gets the nourishment it needs and stuff, after a while, it will graft in into the tree, to where now you will have something that obviously we can tell originally was not part of said tree, but now it works and it gets them the same nutrients, and it now is able to bring in what it has into the equation, but it can't. But it recognizes that it cannot be attached to the equation unless it's part of the culture. And everybody else's culture does that, right? Everybody else's culture does that. That's why you call yourself an African American. They say you can be African, but you better be American first. And you think because African comes first, they're admitting to your African. No, American is the foundation of the word. They just made that up in what, the 1980s, 1970s. So African American. Why can you be a Chinese American? American is the foundation. Be American. But then, okay, we'll recognize you being grafted. You can be a Native American, right? You the person that started this off. Remember the definition of an American originally was a copper-colored person indigenous to the Americas, right? But they say, hey, you can go ahead and you can be a Native American, but make American the thing, because they changed the definition of American. So the Native American is no longer what they used to be. So they say, as long as you put what we say an American is, you can be an Italian American, you can be a German American, you can be a Brazilian American. There's some people crazy enough to think that they're Canadian Americans, even though everybody in here should be Americans from the top of Canada all the way up. Well, I guess even Greenland, right? All the way down to the bottom of, what is it, Chile or Argentina, one of the two. But they'll tell you you can be a Central American. We right, and even though we know, oh, okay, that's what this means, right? You can be a South American, North American, but America is going to be that foundation. But when it comes to your people, people say that you're wrong to say that the foundation should be you. How dare you say that the foundation should be you? How dare you say that you should have land for yourself? How dare you say these things? How dare you talk about that we should have all these different things? Oh, okay, I see you switched over, Brother Clint. Right? How dare you talk about your people? Why? Why? But everybody has this context. If you go over to China right now, China's the foundation. And by the way, in China, they really ain't got respect for too many people, as we've seen. They've been kicking them out, whether black or otherwise, right? But I'm just saying, like, that's the foundation. But for whatever reason, when we say we need to have our own foundation, we're met with stuff, and not just from outside the community, from our own, because we've been trained to be against that. You said where you are and who you are is different. My culture and location aren't the same. Yeah. And that's why when we talk about Israel or something like that, Israel is not the same. Israel is land. If you're talking about Israeli land, that's a place. But unless people that are there are Israel, it's technically not the land. We've been trained different, right? Like people say that all the time about the church, right? That the church is not brick and mortar, but it's not the church until you show up, because they say the church is within you. Now we know that's not real, but that's what people say. But for whatever reason, when it comes to you as a people, we don't comprehend that we have to have a culture. This is what all these lives are about. This is what all this stuff we've been building up. This is what all the stuff that we're putting out, all this information, all of us coming together, us trying to get this land. It's all about us coming together as a group. That's what this is all about. Right. And when you come together as a group, remember, even Willie Lynch said this. We talk about Willie Lynch syndrome. The second that we decide to come outside of being against each other, the second that husbands go back to being husbands, the second that wives go back to being wives, he said the second that we do that is the second we reverse the curse. But he said that you have to go back to your culture. He said that he reversed our nature, the things of nature, and our hands in dirt, all these different things. We are not allowed to do it unless it serves somebody else. And we don't even know what it is. We don't even know, what like a lot of people hear pasta. You think Italian. There's some people are smart enough to know, well, no, it's not Italian, it's Chinese, right? But then some people are smart enough to know it's not Chinese. It actually started in Africa. But a lot of people don't even think about it. You think pasta and you think Italian, because your culture is so unprotected that everybody just gets to say whatever they want. Your culture is so unprotected that they would tell you that you need to be part of a religion called yoga to be able to function, and that's nothing but straight African, right? You're so inundated with stuff that you would actually listen to Afro-Cuban music and say that it's Cuban without even comprehending there's an Afro side to it, an African side. If you protect the culture, you protect it away from misogyny and misandry. The reason why women don't feel the way that they need to be in our society is because there's no culture, that there's no cultural value. Like for real. And we talked about this before. This is why we got to put the system together, and we got to take our leave for real after this, because I need to eat. I feel a little weak, so need to get some kind of food in me real quick. But real talk. Um, what is the reward in our society? And if you want to call it Black society, Moorish society, whatever, what is the reward for a Black man taking care of a Black woman? What's the reward? What is the reward for a Black woman taking care of a Black man? What is the reward for that? Is there one? See why we have to create, we have to go against the narrative. What is the reward for being Israelite? Because there's a reward for being white in America, white by social construct, right? There's a reward for being white in Europe. There's a reward for being white. Go to Africa and carry around a book or a T-shirt or a Bible that has a white Jesus on it. People think that you're more spiritually inclined because they're messed up over there too. But what is the reward for being Black? You don't establish that until there's a culture. So we can talk about this misogyny, misandry till we're blue in the face. I think we praise the Holy Spirit for bringing this up, in the way that she did. The reality is, it's like you can't talk about this without actually having real, legit conversation about, um, the fact that there's no culture. Lack of culture ends up with lack of values. Lack of values ends up with nihilistic behavior. Nihilistic behavior says that there's no morality anymore, and so now people try to say, why are Black people walking around and women act like this and they shaking their butts and brothers out here doing this and mistreating women and blah 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 blah? Because there's no culture and there's no reward for being yourself. There's no reward for your morals being brought to the forefront. The world rewards our children on TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, and people on the podcast. Your children will be rewarded for shaking. And can I say it the way that the world? You know what? Let me stop. I've been saying too many curse words recently, even though I've been quoting people, but I feel like I've been saying too much. So let me make sure that I protect my spirit a little bit, right? But your children be out here, and they get more views and clicks for shaking their behinds than they do for speaking truth, right? There are more women who are going to be in a position where they're going to have these conversations, right? There's going to be more women that are going to be in a position where they're going to have these conversations and stuff that are going to get more views if they show their cleavage, if they make sure that their hair has to be immaculate, if their nails have to be immaculate. They can't just be themselves. Yeah, sure, busy is. Yeah, we talked about that earlier. Yeah, and indigenous. I'm part Cherokee, so I get it, right? But there's less reward for you being you. If you were to go to a corporate setting, you can't go in there with your headdress. As a Cherokee, I'm not even allowed yet to have a headdress anyways, right? But I'm saying if I was, I couldn't go in a corporate place with a headdress. I couldn't go in there with this headdress. You know, there's no reward for it. But you can go in there and be a white person who's got his hair like this or whatever, put in a ponytail, just has this stuff shaggy looking and stuff like that, and wears a suit and tie. There's a reward for that because you don't have a system that protects your culture. That's why we've been talking about this. That's why we're developing. That's why we're traveling. That's why we're talking. That's why we're honing in on it. That's why we're pressing, because we don't have anything that rewards you being you. And until you get that, misogyny and misandry, they have to stand tall. They have to. It's guaranteed. They must. It is a requirement that misogyny and misandry must stand tall, because you have to keep. If you have no system to protect, to reward a black man, or a Moorish man, or a Ghanaian man, or a Mali man, or a Choctaw man, or a Aztec man, or a Taino man, or an Alpha man, or whatever it is, if you have no reward for him being himself, then why would he keep being himself? Men respond to challenges. And if I keep being myself and keep facing the challenge every day to be myself and somebody says, you know what, your reward for that is you can't get a job, your reward for that is that your own woman will look at you bad because she's been trained to make sure that she eats out the palm of our hand. That's what Willie Lynch said, right? Because your own society says that how dare you not get a shape up or get a haircut. One of the biggest Jones ways of frying somebody up, the dozens, whatever you want to call it, one of the biggest ways that we used to do that in society, what we used to say, for real, like, oh, shape up. Like in DMV when I was growing up, somebody had a haircut, and I used to try and keep the fade and everything. Once every 2 weeks, bare minimum. My father had us in the chair, right? But let your shape up be a little off, and as soon as it is shape up, and everybody just start laughing, because if you didn't keep your hair the way that the master used to say your hair had to be cut down enough, if it wasn't fresh, if your part wasn't as fresh as what it used to be, guess what? We make fun of it. We make fun of it. And so you have to be, well, everybody can be everybody that they want, right? But that's what I'm saying. You have to be even in a position where you be who you're supposed to be, right? Exactly. You should be in a good situation. But it's like we are in Samson and Delilah, we can talk about that too, right? But I'm just saying that you said you've experienced that from your own people in the workplace. Yeah, natural from day one. Yeah. And a lot of people been told that they wouldn't make it. So a lot of people cut their hair because they were told, oh, you're going to be too natural, or things like that. But at the end of the day, I'm just saying, if you're a man and you're told that you have to do these things, but you keep saying, no, I'm going to be myself. I'm going to be genuine. I'm going to be myself. I'm going to be genuine. But everybody keeps saying, hey, don't. By the way, white men, can we put it on the other side too? White boys out here. White boy says, man, you know what? I want to be myself. Somebody says, no, we skateboard with this. Someone says, hey, I want to play on the playground. I've seen this on the playground. My son goes out to play. People telling their sons, people telling their daughters, don't play with him. Like, this happens, right? Like, I've been the guy that people said that about. Believe it or not, like it still happens, and it happens quite a bit. And so, like, what I'm saying is there's no reward for us that says that, hey, okay, you know what? So I'm teaching my son from a young age. He gets rewarded. Hey, look, if they're not gonna play, and that's part of the confusion. Even like, I'm getting better. I'm trying to get better, but it used to be well, the Holy Spirit just showed me something. I'm sorry, it's not gonna be shared with y'all. But long story short, um, my son likes playing with his father, not just because every son likes playing with his father, but because his father used to play with him a lot more. And I've been, under under weather or just injured a little bit. But as I'm getting back into it, and he likes it because, hey, if nobody else gonna play with me, dad gonna play with me. He gets rewarded. And we go hard and we do stuff like that. And we'll do this, we'll do that, we'll run, we'll walk different, we'll go to different places. We go different places in the world. We can do this, we can do that. We don't have to be confined to this. He does the same thing with his mom, doesn't have to be confined, right? And so can do all types of stuff, play all types of sports, been involved with stuff from soccer to tennis and all these things, never had to attend the school, all these different things or whatever. And hey, let's go ahead and do this. And hey, I'm taller and faster than everybody else anyway, so I'll play with dad, this and that or whatever. He gets a reward when that, and if somebody treats him wrong or whatever, he gets a reward when he says, hey, you know what? I don't have to worry about impressing you. And that's something he likes to do as part of his love language is, to make people feel great and to speak words of affirmation. And even if you say something bad to him, he'll still go out of his way. But he gets rewarded when it's like, hey, you know what? If they're going to be jerks no matter what, like, let's go ahead and make sure that you have a system over here that rewards you, that says that you can do this, that you can be around your own friends, that you can make sure that you play with your parents and stuff, that you can go ahead and do things that they won't experience, whatever, right? Like we'll do something deeper because there's got to be some kind of reward. There's no reward that's here for us. We don't have something set up to where if if people want to take care of the diaspora doesn't say, we got you, queen, we got you, king, right? We don't have those things. I see you, MSQ, right? But there's got to be something that says we got you. There's a reward for that, right? Once again, if a black woman takes care, if a black queen takes care of a black king, what's the reward, right? What's the reward? We don't have it together. Is all I'm saying. So if we get into the culture and if we start protecting the culture, if we start loving the culture, if we start loving ourselves, if we start loving Yahweh, and we start doing what He told us to do, misogyny and misandry has to go away, right? Or at least away from us. But we have to be the gatekeepers of our culture. If we would take care of our culture, we would take care of the misogyny and the misandry. If we would take care of our culture, we then take care of all these different things that have become a fight. It's not our fight, right? I'm not saying if some like there are people who have told us like that they're homosexual and they deal with it or whatever, but they still listen in, right? But so you're right, and they don't feel like we gyp them or try to tear them up, this and that or whatever, because they recognize what I'm saying. I'm telling you, culturally speaking, this is who we are. This is what we're supposed to do, and they respect the fact that we keep what we're supposed to keep. Period. And that's our goal in life, right? That's our goal. How you doing, Minister Selection? So anyway, thank you guys for being on. I really do need to, especially after all the traveling and some stuff like that. My back's still a little off and everything. I got some stuff to do. Those who are in Chicago, don't we put the information out, but if you're in Chicago, we're going to be here the 27th, 28th, which is today and tomorrow. We'll be in Detroit really late on the 29th, so I'm not sure about the 29th meeting, but we'll definitely be there on the 30th. And we're looking at finishing up some of those items and stuff as well. Thank you all for praying for us. Um, thank you for helping us out. Thank you for those that met up with us on the way. Thank you to those who will be trying to meet up with you possibly on the way back. When we're going down and stuff like that. So we appreciate you all. We're thankful and grateful to each and every one of you. And we look forward to talking to you guys very soon. Don't forget June 5th is legit, like right around the corner. June 5th is not this Sunday, right? But it'll be the following Sunday. So June 5th will be on Zoom, treat it like Shabbat. We'll be on Zoom. Got to actually meet up with everybody. So we got to fit that in somewhere today, I guess, too. But we're thankful and grateful. Those who are in Chicago, Chi-Town, if you're meeting up with us as a group over here at the hotel, we're going to try and meet up at 6 p.m. So if you can come on over. I messed around on the food and stuff and everything, so I'll take care of something for us to be able to snack on or whatever while we get together. And my wife and I be able to have some more conversation, I guess, as far as whatever she needs us to know. I'll try to make sure I get that information out. But we thank you guys. We appreciate you. I'm going to go ahead and take my leave here. And we thank you again. Thank you for your prayers. Thank you for your love. Thank you for your kind words. Thank you for the vision or being faithful to the vision. And we appreciate you all. So, as oh well, once I'm sorry, we give all the praise and honor to the Most High. Have Elohim, please make sure that you study this word so that you can not only be hearers but also doers as well. Thank you again to my wife, the Honorable Maya, for helping us out. You can check her out on TikTok, YouTube, her website, and Pinterest at Bloom and Flourish, not A and D, the letter N, Bloom and Flourish. She's a healer, herbalist, chemist, and biologist by degree. And we thank you for supporting her and supporting her business. Um, Thank you to everybody who's just part of the community. We appreciate you so much. All this behind the scenes stuff that's going on and more things that are being asked. Thank you for those who are. Oh, if you have class tonight, class will be via recording. Okay, so if you have class tonight for herbalism, that'll be via recording. We got a recording that's coming out to you guys for Tuesday night's class for those who, Tuesday night's class, and tomorrow, sisters they have the women's meeting at 7. So remember that. Um, and also the Honorable Maya, I guess, will be doing the last one for the month. Her and I don't know if Sister Ro be on there again, but it'll be the last one for the month in the rising, I guess, at 10 a.m. Eastern New York time. So, but we thank you guys. We appreciate you. If you want more details on Chicago, Detroit these next few days, get in contact with us somehow, some way. I will do my best to make sure I check my DMs and everything. But email, text, whatever, let us know if you are here, if you're coming, so we know what's going on and how to make sure that we get you the information. So thank you, we honor you. I think that's all I have. As always, has been Pastor Kofi, Pastor Servant of Christ, where we are always changing lives one mind at a time by being the voice of the voiceless and speaking the unspoken. And until we have the great privilege, opportunity, and responsibility of being in front of you all again, please remember, as always, just that you are loved, you are necessary, you are majestic, you're fearfully and wonderfully made, and you, which is all of us working together, will be the reason why people who are in the system no longer have to be of it. I'll see you tonight briefly at 8 p.m. Eastern New York time. And who knows, we might even have a couple of people to say hello around us, depending on what they have to do. But we look forward to seeing you guys very soon. Talk to you soon. Shalom. Peace.